Hey guys, I have an interesting set of games for you today. One of them a viewer recommendation, so join me in checking out another 10 less known Amiga games. Are you the smartest person in every room? Of course you are. I know you definitely are. I'd even stretch it slightly by saying that you're the smartest person on planet right now. I'm not exaggerating, I never said in the universe. Cause Rick Sanchez may give you run for your money, but he's off-planet at the moment on a super important mission of intergalactic importance. He's been jealous of me having my own Batman here, and he's looking for a space Batman. Half man, half space bat, or something. The bottom half is man, apparently. Anyway, since you're such a brainiac, I bet you love trivia, right? I'm sure that no questions in Trivial Pursuit are a challenge for you now, so that's why I've got a different game for you today. One that's aptly named too. Powerplay, the Game of Gods, for up to 4 players. You play as one of 4 mythological Greek gods, Apollo, Hermes, Hecate, or Aphrodite, and you choose a team of 4 warriors to represent you in Powerplay tournament. A battle for the biggest brain in the heavens, played on a chess-like board. I know, you've never expected a trivia game to have a story, but here you go, there's always a first. The square fields on board are divided into 4 colors, representing a particular subject area. Each question has 4 possible answers, and if you answer correctly, you earn so-called wisdom points, and can move one of your warriors 1 square in any direction. When you accumulate 25 wisdom points, you are allowed to promote one of your warriors into a higher level. When 2 opposing teams' warriors enter the same square, a trivia-style challenge ensues, with quickfire-like questions, and whomever answers more of them first correctly gets the points. If you answer wrong though, you lose them, so that's worth keeping in mind. A loser of such brain bout has one of his warriors' skill level lowered. Oh, and to be clear, the higher the level of the warrior, the more difficult it is to beat in a challenge, but it also has to answer more demanding questions in the non-challenge trivia. Don't focus on just one warrior though, as pieces left aside and ignored after a while may move on their own accord, and not necessarily into the category you're strong at. Powerplay originally came out on 64, where it was a huge hit. On Amiga, it not only never reached the similar heights of popularity, but never really gained any acclaim and was largely ignored and dead on a rival title. Which is odd, as it's pretty fun in multiplayer, provided all parties playing it like trivia. Archipelagos takes place in the future, long after we've poisoned the Earth to the point that the polar caps melted, covering most of the planet with water, leaving only remote lonely islands of decaying land masses known as archipelagos. So keep all that in mind next time you forget to sort your trash before throwing it out. Since the future was doomed, humanity decided to quickly build machines to clean the remaining surface and prepare for repopulation. These were supplemented by genetically altered plants designed to live off of pollution and help in its fast processing. And as most things that are done fast and not careful, both of these failed. Machines turned into radiation generators and plants became hostile. So, since the autonomous machines couldn't be trusted anymore, you're picked to be the one who's our last chance of survival, who has to clean the islands one by one. You do so by disabling radiation generators on each of the islands, so you have to destroy numerous power generators supplying this with power first, and then get back to the radiation generator racing against counting down clock to turn it off before it melts down. There are a few different kinds of enemies that will try to stop you, from so-called necromancers, spheres spreading pollution all around, through mutated trees polluting the ground they grow on, to eco-eggs and air cleaners. First explode in toxic flame upon contact, second actually do clean the air. But out of literally everything, living organisms included, such as yourself for instance. Despite all I just said and what you see on your screen scrolling smoothly in first-person perspective, Archipelagos is not really an arcade title, but a puzzler that will require use of your grey mouse as much as of your joystick control skills. Or mouse, I should say, really, as it's controlled with a rodent. So you won't only eradicate the pollutants, but will have to help in rebuilding the ecosystem too. The game consists of 10,000 islands, yes, you heard that right, so completing them all will be nigh impossible, not only because the difficulty ramps up quite quickly, but also because of how much time it takes to beat those later levels. But if you're up for it, it'll be fun, at least until you get bored or tired with doing the same thing for literally thousands of times. I've used literally twice, well now thrice, in one preview. Batman will be pissed, as he's sort of a grammar police around here. Janosik, or how he's originally called in Poland, Janosik, was a fantasy historical folk hero, basically Polish/Czech Robin Hood if you will. So he was a Carpathian Mountains Highlander who stole from rich and gave to the poor, and also had his wealthy noble arch-nemesis, Baron Herbert. Same but different, you know? Janosik the game originally came out on 8-bit Atari microcomputers and then was converted to the Amiga, polishing the presentation slightly, with an accent on slightly. Other than that though, it's still a simple 8-bit game in its gameplay design. Story-wise, aforementioned evil Baron Herbert, hearing about Janosik helping oppressed peasants, in revenge captured Marina, Janosik's beloved, and imprisoned her in his castle, hoping to lure him into a trap. As evil plans go, this one's not that bad and it was partly successful, as Janosik in your capable hands set off to save his love. What he did not predict though is that you'll be the one controlling the folk hero, and with you leading him, he can't and won't fail. You start armed with just a small one-hand axe, but as you go through the game you'll be able to find and use other items. Not weapons though. The game is divided into 3 worlds of forest, village and castle, and you'll need to battle your way through hundreds of Baron's goons and other random enemies like bears to complete it. Why would bears be against you? I don't know, but it is what it is. Game logic is the culprit, I suppose. Now, as I said all that, let me clarify something. Janosik, same as many very late conversions from 8-bit systems to Amiga, is dog shit. Quite literally. From the moment you put the disc into the drive and run the game, a very specific odor will emerge and start spreading in your game room. It's very intensive and will make your eyes burn. First of all, graphics are pretty bad. Many of the backgrounds are walls of black, sprites have maybe 1 or 2 frames of animation for walking at most, and generally speaking, it just looks awful. There's no death animations to speak of, so the enemy that you kill just disappears instantly as if it was never there. The controls are clunky and your attack looks as if Janosik was practicing one of those Fortnite dances rather than trying to actively hurt the enemy. It's terrible. So unless you like really bad games, avoid this one if you can. JoBlade is another game that landed on the Amiga after being ported from an 8-bit source. Even more so, after being moderately successful on MSX in 1986, it moved to all other popular 8-bit machines and released there as a budget title. And this Amiga version is basically that budget release with upgraded graphics and sounds. It could be argued that budget-released 8-bit port was not needed on an Amiga in 1988 and that it had to be a terrible game, but it actually wasn't. I loved it on my C64 and on Amiga it was as good. That said, as good was not enough. 16-bit gamers required, no craved 16-bit quality, and not only in presentation but also in game design. And JoBlade was all-out 8-bit in how it played. It's not bad per se, it's just not what we were after on our shiny and powerful new systems. The game takes place during World War II and places you in shoes of the titular tough guy, JoBlade, and these are very tiny shoes carrying a huge head. JoBlade is a side-view flick-scrolling shooter adventure mixture in which you have to shoot the bad guys as much as you need to solve some minor puzzles. You'll pick up items like cell keys, enemy uniforms and extra ammo, and they will be really helpful on your mission. What mission, you may wonder? Well, a villain known only as Crack's Bloodfinger has captured and imprisoned 6 world leaders, and each of them is held for ransom in a different location around his swarming with bodies base. So, your mission, if you choose to accept it and load the game up, is to free all 6 captives and destroy Bloodfinger's hideout. So you will search for the leaders in different parts of the complex and also activate bombs to destroy it when you're done. They are timed and leave you with exactly 20 minutes to do it all, so yeah, your math is correct, it's a 20-minute game. But not really. Because if you decide to give JoBlade a chance, don't pick up items that look like a large hand grenades too early, as these are set bombs and solving their puzzle will start the 20-minute timer. It's best to save at least a couple of the hostages before you touch your first bomb. Oh, and if you fail the bomb puzzle, the game will end then and there. So there's that. Personally, I'm not a fan of 16-bit JoBlade, because I know what Amiga is really capable of. But on C64, it was a blast. Bad pun intended. Jurajski Sen, which loosely translates to Jurassic Dream, and I'll call it that through the rest of this preview, is a late Polish Amiga platformer, similar in presentation and gameplay look to much earlier and also better prehistory. The background story is portrayed by a short comic-like intro that sadly is only in Polish, but roughly depicts our hero in a cinema watching Jurassic Dream, the latest blockbuster, and loving it. Afterwards he comes back home, plays video game for a little while and goes to bed eventually. While dreaming, he's transferred mysteriously into prehistoric times where he must survive and find a way to get back home to our times. To do so, you must find the magical ancient talisman that is the key to going back to the future. I'm sorry, I couldn't help myself. I'm Batman! Yeah, you're right, it's the best time travel movie, Bruce. Jurassic Dream is as typical of a platformer as they come. You're completing the levels going from left to right, defeating hundreds upon hundreds of various thematically correct and completely out of place enemies alike, and collecting energy and points. While the graphics are really nice with large detailed sprites and colorful backgrounds, the animations are rather disappointing. looking as if they were quickly put together from 2 or 3 frames at most in a rush just to push the game on the shelves. Which may have been the case as it came out in 1995, when Commodore was officially long gone and Amiga was on its way out too, slowly giving away numbers to steadily growing PC and consoles user base. Additionally, there's no scrolling, the screens flick between each other and the controls are very loose for the lack of a better word, making Jurajski Dream feel very 8-bit despite clearly using 16-bit presentation. Now, don't get me wrong, it's nowhere near as bad as Janosik we spoke about just a few minutes ago, but it's definitely below average for the Amiga, and given the really good graphics, it's also an opportunity wasted for a fun and playable release. As we go through many games for the series, you've probably noticed that between 1995 and 1997, Polish devs kept releasing games on the Amiga more than anyone else. Sadly, most of them were either pretty bad or average at best. Jurajski Dreams falls somewhere in between. It's probably because the country was not as wealthy as its neighbors were, and cheap and easily accessible Amiga was still a viable option for the main gaming machine in many households, before they all moved to much more expensive PCs eventually, over the next few years. In the end, Jurajski Dream is definitely a game fans of platformers should own and complete, but everyone else can pretty much skip it. Alright, since we've talked about few average games, why don't we cover one that's actually really good? What do you say? I knew you'd be into it. So, Jupiter's Masterdrive is a top-down arcade racer with shooting. Fun, right? The races take place on Jupiter and its moons that all have been long colonized in the far-off future. Each race is 3 laps in a different location and in various conditions and features just 3 cars. And if you think that 3 cars is not a lot, it's plenty enough for this fun racer. Trust me. There are various power-ups, some that are collectible like weapons and others that are incorporated into the track itself, like shortcuts and speed boosting paths. These last often don't follow the usual track layout and can move you ahead quite considerably. The game can be played in single races, which are quick and fun, or in much more immersive and involving full season mode. It will see you going through various action-packed league races and even out-of-the-league time bonus money-earning duels on enclosed arenas. Money collected in standard and bonus races can be used to soup up your car, and there's quite a few of these upgrades actually. You can work on engine, turbo, brakes, fuel tank, armor and cannon. Graphics, while not world-shattering, are pretty clean and overall nice, but most importantly very fast and super smooth scrolling. So racing in Jupiter's Masterdrive alone in season or with a friend in split-screen mode is a pure pleasure, both to behold and to actually play. If I had to rate the best Amiga's top-down racers, I'd place Jupiter's Masterdrive comfortably somewhere between the very best out there, so Supercars 2, and nearly as good Nitro. If you like top-down racers, this little known gem will definitely be a highlight of your collection, as it's not only rare but also very fun. And that can't be said about all obscure games, sadly. Despite what it may sound like, Kelly X is not the name of an adult actress, but a first-person perspective space shooter on the Amiga. I mean, it could very well be a name of an actress, or a performer I should say really, but I have no way of confirming or denying that without googling, and I really don't need those kinds of suggestions in my search results from today onward to pop out anytime I try to access Twitter. I mean X. While it looks like Kelly X took the flight controls and shooting straight from the Elite, nothing else is similar between the two titles. And it was never the shooting that made Elite such a well-known and beloved game. Anyway, in Kelly X you fly for the so-called Peace Foundation, a futuristic militaristic version of Greenpeace. Your task is to seek out rogue space stations that illegally dump nuclear waste and destroy the radioactive material canisters, as well as Guardian fighters protecting those. Your ship moves forward automatically on its own and you cannot stop it. You can however speed it up or slow it down. Steering is either with a joystick or a mouse, and neither is perfect, with their own ups and downsides. Getting shot or colliding with enemies depletes your shields, same way hyperspace jumps do. And when it's all gone, it's a game over, so keep an eye on it. Also, set jumps drop you in a random location, so don't overuse them, it's not worth it. You're armed with a laser and there are no upgrades to it, so the progression feels very horizontal. Doing the same thing over and over never really lets you feel like you've achieved anything noteworthy. And that's the main issue with Kelly X, that it's repetitive and, well, boring really. So unless you absolutely love the first-person shooters and have to sample them all, it's not worth more of your time than 2-3 plays at best. The Keys to Maramon originally released on PC, and then a year later was ported to C64 and Amiga, and today's version that we'll look at is the best out of them all. It's a real-time action role-playing, combat-wise similar to Times of Lore and feeling like an early draft for 1996 Diablo, all because it's action-packed, rather simple as compared to other RPGs of the time, and takes place in and around a single location, the titular town of Maramon. I think, however, that it's all by design, to appeal to people unfamiliar with the genre, to lure them in and get them used to it, so that they could later on try out and fall in love with bigger RPGs of the early 90s. It's a far-fetched assumption, I know, given that I have nothing, no details or gossip to base it on, it's just how I feel. And especially that there's virtually no reason for one developer to make a game that would spark up interest in games by other devs. That would just be silly and a bad business practice, whichever way you wanna look at it. So yeah. Anyway, The Keys to Maramon is set in the same world as developers' earlier Magic Candle games and uses their modified engine too, meaning graphics and animation are not its strongest suits, and it shows. The sprites are rather small and poorly animated, and fighting bodies looks and feels like literally just walking into them, so in a way you're stomping them down. Or, as it looks more like it really, challenging them to the dancing duels and winning them all by sturdy dancing enemies into oblivion. Still, what I'm trying to say here is that the presentation is a little disappointing. But if you think I'm done dumping on the game already, you're wrong, cause it also has sounds. Or beeps and boops, I should say really. They feel as if they were directly moved from PC speaker to the Amiga, not using any of the system's capabilities and replacing all in-game sounds with generic broken Pac-Man-like sound files. It's painful to listen if you have nothing else running in the background. All that said, despite what it may sound like, I don't dislike the game. Quite the opposite, in fact. It's fun for what it is, and having to rid the city of monsters attacking it at night, in the same time trying to figure out the mystery of the 4 towers hovering above it, is hella fun. Kid Gloves 2: The Journey Back is an adventure platformer and not really a sequel to the first game. I mean, they're both platformers, but other than that, they're nothing alike. And it's because Kid Gloves 2 was originally developed as Little Bow, before being purchased by Millennium and released as a sequel to the earlier, equally as obscure game. If you give it time and play it a little, it feels more like Super Wonder Boy rather than anything else. Story-wise, an evil wizard known only as Wivelard kidnapped your girlfriend, and you, being the loving and courageous boyfriend that you are, instead of going to the fantasy police, hiring a group of adventurers to track him down, or pleading for help with medieval Batman, decides to grab a butter knife, put on the best makeup you can and go for the wizard. And yeah, I said makeup. Just look at that lipstick on the little fellow running around the screen. He's sporting it like a champ. The game is divided into 6 worlds, and these in turn into 4 levels each, for a total of 24 stages to beat. There are obviously dozens of different enemies that will cross your path that for whatever the reason took the wizard's side, and they will have to be disposed of. Fortunately, for the most part, they're not very demanding, so shouldn't pose too much of a challenge to a seasoned warrior such as yourself. Some environmental traps are also part of the design of Kid Gloves' world too, so if you'll just be wary of anything that looks dangerous and assume that everything is a trap that might kill you and should be avoided, then you should be fine. Most of them telegraph themselves quite obviously though, so shouldn't really surprise you on your travels. Defeated enemies, unless scripted for a particular drop behavior, like the first one in level 2 for instance, leave random items behind. And they can be new weapons, collectible objects, magic spells and such, so certain replayability factor is definitely present in the game. Especially that Kid Gloves 2 features many hidden bonus areas that often require a little bit of joystick gymnastics to get to. End of level bosses, while not overly difficult, are quite fun too and add to the overall atmosphere. I remember some magazines back in the day complaining that the game was very generic and did nothing new. And that's not a far-fetched judgment, and it's factually correct. But while it does same things other titles did before, it does all of them quite well. And if you're not gonna hold the lack of genuine innovation against it, you won't be disappointed playing Kid Gloves 2. Night Force is a flip-screen side-view fantasy beat-em-up. Well, more hack and slash than beat-em-up really, but you know, potato-potato, tomato-tomato, ketchup-tomato sauce. The evil wizard Red Sabbath, cause Green Sabbath was on holiday and was not as evil, conquered the land of Beloth and kidnapped the princess ruling it. Frankly speaking, there was a king there too, but he died, so... Anyway, Beloth is not your usual kingdom. It's a mythical place where many different time periods cross, a place torn out of time, if you will. As per usual, when evil emerges and there's no one strong or brave enough to face it, you're the one to take it upon yourself to clean the land of it. So you need to complete 5 levels, each corresponding to a different time period. Defeat the evil wizard clone, defending each of them, and collect 7 magical talismans held by wizard's minions. Each of those talismans brings advantages to you on your quest, but they only work in appropriate time periods that they belong to. and these don't have to be the same period they've been found in. But since you can jump between the levels after getting an interesting amulet that would work in another, you can move to it and take advantage of it. You will face a lot of different enemies, thematically different depending on the time period that you'll be in, and they can be anything from goblin-like creatures through trolls, bubbles and birds, yes, you heard that right, all the way to robot-like enemies and bouncing springs in the future period. It's an odd mixture that feels as interesting as it feels out of place from time to time. The graphics, especially the lush detailed backgrounds and all sprites, are excellent for 1989, and the definite highlight of the presentation. But the combat and jumping animations are just atrocious, to the point that I can't imagine myself playing Night Force today. It's just not happening. The game is jumpy, shaky and generally speaking unpleasant to play. If that wasn't enough, you're never really feeling like you're in a full control of what you're doing. It's not only uncomfortable to actually play, but even to look at, which I'm sure you've realized by now. Night Force is terrible wasted opportunity, cause with the graphics that it offered and popular at the time side view brawling, it could have been a huge success. And what we've ended up with was a jerky mess that nearly everyone managed to forget 5 minutes after laying their eyes on it first. What do you think about today's selection of unknown oldies? Any you knew, or maybe they look like something you'd like to try? Perhaps I've helped you to avoid a terrible stinker. In whichever case, let me know and let's discuss it in the comments below. If you liked the video, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. If you didn't, well then there's thumbs down there too. But I suppose you wouldn't have persevered up to this point if you really didn't. Around 60% of you are not subscribed, and there's currently no way of knowing if YouTube will decide to recommend you the next episode or not, other than subscribing and hitting that bell, that is. And when you hit that bell, whenever the new video is out, YouTube will actually send you a small and friendly notification about it, so you wouldn't miss it. If you'd like to support the channel, Patreon and YouTube memberships are a great way of doing so. They will help me release better content, and also they get first dibs on all new videos before they're publicly accessible on YouTube. If you can't or don't want to do that though, likes and subscribes are great too. I would like to take a moment here and thank all the YouTube creators from whose videos short bits were taken to serve as a background to my commentary. They're amazing and stars among the retro community. You will find names of their channels at the top of the screen when their footage is running, and also in the video description below. For me though, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time. Peace.